and I will endeavour to abide by it. Unlike Tony Blair, with his fictitious 45-minute claim, which not only turned out to be a complete fallacy, but also the greatest deceiving factor in swaying Parliament's opinion in favour of an illegal war, using disproportionate force, resulting in the destruction of an entire nation, ludicrously in the name of liberty and humanity. Much was said today, and since 2003, about the question of the legality of war in Iraq. And for those of us who are seeking the truth, all we received from official sources at best were evasive, incomprehensible, and sometimes nonsensical answers. The reason for that is very simple. They are trying endlessly to justify the unjustifiable, both in the context of domestic and international law obligations. As for the laws of human rights, then nearly every extraterritorial provision under the 1950 ECHR Convention was breached, and the successful cases brought forward by the public interest lawyers against the Ministry of Defense stands testimony to that. It's always useful to remember that one of the main purposes of international law is the prevention of one state, usually very powerful, or a group of states, to act as judge, jury, and executioner, overriding the collective view of the international community. It is upon this principle that the maintenance of peace and security in the world formed the highly powerful and influential United Nations Security Council in 1945. Well, the irony is, two permanent member states of that very council chose to defy the will of the international community in reaching a private consensus on a most serious matter, such as the waging of war, invading and occupying a sovereign nation. One aspect of this consequence of that decision, as I will be discussing in a moment, was particularly horrific. I only have to cite the very vast volume of legal opinion drafted by experts in international law, the likes of Philip Sands QC and Lord Leicester QC, all of whom have concluded that the invasion of Iraq and its occupation was a major breach of Article 2 of the United Nations Charter. There was, however, a very subtle, yet far more sinister consequence to this war, one that was most overshadowed by other events, and that was the specific and particular targeting of scientists and academics of Iraq, those who constitute the pillars of society. During his appearance at the Chilcot inquiry on the 29th of January this year, and in an answer to a question of the panel, Tony Blair said, and I quote, "Even if there were no WMDs, he, and by that he means Saddam Hussein, continued to have the know-how relating to these weapons." Clearly, Blair was not making reference to Saddam himself being the holder of this knowledge. Rather, the large number of scientists and academics in Iraq at that time. Presenting his answer as one of the main fallback justifications for the invasion of Iraq, even if there were no actual weapons found. This view would have most certainly been shared by the American administration during Blair's meetings with Bush prior to the war. More importantly, this phrase would have been chosen to be the last resort or contingency in the absence of any weapons on the ground. And given Iraq's past involvement, which was not covered by any United Nations resolutions at that time, in the manufacture of these weapons, the presence of expert knowledge is a certainty. It's worthy of notice that Tony Blair is a barrister by profession himself. He failed to remember, or to note, that both UN Security Council resolutions 687 and 1441, dealing with Iraq, made no mention of the know-how issue. Therefore, using it as justification for war fell outside the boundaries of the UN resolutions Tony Blair claims to have upheld. Well, know-how is defined in the Oxford Dictionary as expertise, technical skill, or knowledge of how to do something well. This definition refers in no less terms to knowledge held by human resources, otherwise known as scientists and academics, in a variety of subjects. Collectively, they hold the key to the know-how referred to in Tony Blair's answer. It is further noted that the vast majority of this know-how has dual use, both lawful and unlawful. And it has become apparent after the occupation of Iraq that this knowledge was not used in any way for prohibited use. Therefore, Tony Blair was at best relying on fanciful assumptions, distorted intelligence, and grossly negligent statements to legitimize what was otherwise the most serious breach of international law, which led to the destruction of a sovereign state. It's common knowledge that Iraqi academics and scientists were the primary target of assassinations, kidnappings, and displacement, both inside and outside Iraq, immediately after the invasion of the country. And it is my humble view that the main cause of these attacks were the unlawful decree issued by the then head of the CPA, Paul Bremer, to disband all organs of the state, including those concerned with security. His decision left the civilian population of Iraq without the right to sufficiency of protection and was in breach of the Fourth Hague Convention, respecting the laws and customs of war ratified on the 18th of October 1907. Article 43, if I may quote, "The authority of the legitimate power having in fact passed on to the hands of the occupier, the latter shall take all measures in his power to restore and ensure, as far as possible, public order and safety, while respecting, unless absolutely prevented, the law in force in that country." Well, there was nothing preventing the occupier in Iraq from respecting the laws already there. By abolishing all organs of the state, the US acted in breach of the statute, thereby causing chaos and confusion, and possibly the murder of an unknown number of scientists, generally very large, gradually eliminating the know-how referred to in Tony Blair's answer. It is widely known that knowledge itself cannot be destroyed, but the holders of the knowledge can. For example, books can be burnt, computers can be destroyed, and humans can be murdered. So I think, to conclude my speech, and I've only been given 1 minute, so it's not my fault, I think it's time for us to petition the Director for Public Prosecutions, at least to question Blair under caution as to what he knew and what his answer to Chilcot inquiry meant. And if there was a link between the invasion and the murder of those scientists, then of course there is a charge of conspiracy. At least from that questioning, we may be able to find out the reason why those scientists were murdered and if they had anything to do with the invasion at all. Thank you very much.